Alright, well, here we are in October of 17, and I've flown through most of the turn. I'm actually through 5.5 turns of the month already, with just more repositioning, filtering troops in and out. There are turns where an 8-5 comes in for the Germans and one gets pulled at the same time, which, you know, is just a matter of headache if you were playing it out to try to keep the unit designations correct. Well, what do we see? We're at end of the German turn, ready for the British turn. Now, I know the British are going to attack. They want to make an attack wherever they can along the front that's best, and that's probably going to be somewhere up here to try to do a mobile attack and then slide into place and maybe, you know, actually get an advantage on a hex. Maybe not. I'm not sure. But to try to get the most punch and distance, try to make it up to those Belgians, get them into the game, or at least enough of a threat on the Germans that they have to yank the line back and give up maybe all these Hindenburg line hexes that they've built and lose that advantage. The other thing that's going on is we have a real American unit on the board finally. Now, the game kind of handles the American units strangely. So, if you're familiar with the history, the Americans spent a lot of time behind the lines during 1917 training. And in fact, it was a very difficult thing to get them onto the line. The way this game handles it is it says you can put 8 divisions into a situation where they can be only 8 divisions can be supplied per turn by British or French sources. This is a great solution for the French. Now, unfortunately, this is not a very good unit right now. It's supposed to be a 5-4, but I can't do that with this unit, so it's a 4-4 when it came on the map. Obviously, either a mistake here or a mistake in the way that I'm understanding how unit strength can be handled. It's supposed to only be 1 marker on top of a single unit, though, and it's one of the few things that makes this not a pure strength point game. It's that the OOB can't actually be represented by the counters on the board as the rules handle it. Okay, but given that aside, that's really not much. I can throw it into the line, though. That did not happen. It did not happen right away. And even though that's a weak unit, it can replace, you know, one of these 4-4s or help stiffen the French line down here, and that's what I'm planning on doing with it. But it's completely ahistorical. The Americans did not start throwing things in the line until they had to. And, well, you could say, oh, it's kind of a... But look, this game is trying to be very, very historically accurate about forcing decisions that you had to make. It goes around trying to generate those decisions in the players, instead saying, you can't stockpile too much supply, you can't do this. And these things are somewhat believable, but this one is not. The U.S. Army was not allowed to join the line until it was definitely needed. And I wish there was more rules handling that, or more restriction, like, hey, you can put up to 8 divisions on the line once you have X amount of divisions on the board, or something like that. Because what's going to be happening here is they're just going to start filling up the line, just as the French desired, until they hit the 8 divisions, which I don't know. I don't even think that happens in 1917. And that's kind of annoying to me. And then they can participate in the attacks, etc. And again, this was not done at this rate. These pieces that were on the board were not sent into combat immediately. Alright, let's go on with these assaults. Hey, bonus, I'm listening to the Guns, Dice, and Butter with Dunnigan. Great listen, you know, I mean, I've enjoyed Herman, I've enjoyed Berg, I've enjoyed most Nick Karp. I've enjoyed when he has, you know, these great designers on. That's worth listening. It's not worth listening to somebody like me. But, I don't know. Some people think so. But I certainly don't want to hear myself. I can hear myself all the time. But it's just great to be able to tap into these, you know, real fundamental forces in the hobby and hear their views on the subject matter. I can't recommend it enough. So the English launched an attack up here. That didn't work. Mobile attack, trying to get some kind of flanking action going. Then they went for a 2-hex attack on this. That did work. They got a maximal roll. Drove the Germans back. The Germans are going to have to patch another hole in the line. They want to keep holding Paris, or the adjacency to Paris, because they think they can still do an assault into that. They've destroyed this fortress. They're in a position where they should be able to gain some traction there, and if they break through with the initial attack with those assault troops, and they're thinking about doing it all along the line, just hitting everywhere and trying to, just break the French line all the way across in as many places as they can to jiggle things up and really crush the French here. That's their goal. They don't want to fight the British. They don't. The British are eating away their demoralization points. They're up to 600, but that's only halfway to their first problem step. So, well, because the French are beginning to push some Americans in here, and they're planning on an attack from the south at some point using those big American units. Those American divisions are kind of interesting because they are huge. Now, there's rules where American brigades count as whole divisions, but those big divisions still just count as divisions. That's pretty impressive. All right, on to the last turn of October. And once again, facing the English, who are pretty much willing to spend any effort to advance, attacking out of supply again. They gain another hex. The Germans just weren't able to throw enough defense in the way, and they left the weak spot where they really didn't want it to the north a little bit more. You've got English forces just pushing further and further towards the Somme. I don't know. I don't see how the Germans are going to hold out against this without a further retraction, but I really wanted that assault to go along this line, try to break, and see if I can get those Paris advantages out of it. Because casualty-wise, the war is what the war is. Casualties, you might make mistakes and take big losses. In this case, the Brits gained a hex. Both sides took 5 points. The Brits have a territorial goal and a deformation of the line goal and all that. But what they really are neglecting is what they need to win, which is greater losses. On the other hand, the English can afford the losses right now. The Germans don't feel like they can. The French don't feel like they can. Well, as we slide into November, I noticed something kind of annoying. I decided, hey, let me check what the victory conditions are. I think they're just surrender. And indeed they are. Central Powers can get a substantial victory by causing France or Britain to surrender at the end of the third turn of November 18th. Great. I look at their decisive victory conditions, and that's a French surrender in 1914. As far as I can tell, I'll look down here. Perhaps the Schlieffen Plan has some victory conditions here. Otherwise, yeah, they don't have any automatic victory during the Schlieffen Plan. There's no indication of any victory except by the demoralization points. Therefore, you can't win the decisive victory by the rules as written. Of course, had Paris fallen and, it had been the ultimate German victory, which I think it actually was the ultimate German victory without Paris falling. I think Germany did very, very well at the beginning, and conceivably, I probably should have called the game at that point. But the way that it's written, there seems to be no way to get that automatic decisive victory in 1914. Which is kind of one of those other little disturbing factors in the game. That bothered me right from the beginning. The Schlieffen Plan should have a chance of taking the French out by the brutality and sheer strength of it. And mine came close, I think. It got me to the highest possible level, which probably should be enough. Anyway, we got the new units out for November. Lots and lots of German units, but this is all artillery here. That's 10 artillery pieces. It's going to help the assault, but there's also withdrawals going on, units shifting back and forth, some of them to no real point. It's not like, this is just the 8.5s coming out and getting replaced by the 12.5s. It's 8.5s coming out and coming in at the same time and all kind of crap like that. And I should have moved this during the German turn. I don't know where it would have gone. Put it down here, I guess. We're beginning to dig in along this new line, but the British already are dug in back here. So the gains of last turn were cemented, and it really looks like the Germans have to pull out and give up their territory, or at least to some extent. At least down here, they don't want to be in that hex anymore. That'll free up a bunch of units that maybe they can slide down and help defend the line. But they really cannot stand against the English. They cannot. The slightly heavier units, the new combat chart, even without tanks involved, they're having an almost impossible time holding the line, especially once the line's already breached. The Brits can just keep punching and punching and punching, and they're willing to take equal losses. All right, probably the last turn for tonight there. Well, the Allies were hoping to launch something. This is the beginning of November right away, but the Germans pulled out of this hex, and the Brits moved into it. Basically, the British attack was being planned. And then when I started looking at the chaos in the British line and units that need to be pulled back and recuperated, I decided I can hold off a little bit. It may be painful, but it looks like there's going to be somewhere I can attack. This whole thing is just such a stretch for the Germans. The Germans didn't pull out of here. They still have this dream of taking Paris by pushing back over this land that they gave up earlier and, just crushing it as their only real chance of victory. And I think it's reasonable. They want to do that first attack across the line with all those Strasstruppen and see what they can do. The Hindenburg line's still there, but it's really a threat. And if this cracks, well, there's still a chance to pull back. The French also had some thoughts of an assault, but they're low on supplies and they have no real reason to desire launching one at this point. Well, the English juggernaut reawakens and keeps pushing deeper, and another hex gained. This is a case where there were two hexes against one. There was no entrenchment there. The German position's not tenable. They've got to get out of here. And I'm just going to peel them up and try to defend what I can up there at, Mondidia. See how that holds, because there's just no way. And, my assault plans, they're being spoiled by the English ability to just crunch through the German line. And yeah, I couldn't pull out. I just couldn't do it. Wanted to shift things over. There's no real harm. I could give up to this hex. I could have slipped back a little bit, whatever, but that weakens the position and makes it possible maybe for an attack across there. And the German whole plan really centers on Paris. It has all game for me, and it definitely does at this point. Well, the Brits pushed another hex, but they pushed it up here. They're not threatening this bulge here. They want to make it to the Belgians. They have a different goal in mind. And they drive all the way to the Somme here. Again, just two hexes. Not terribly different in terms of losses. The Brits caused 17, the Germans caused 14. The problem is that it's easy on this new chart to dislodge things, especially if they're not entrenched. It's really easy to move the armies because you're doing so much more damage that even decent-sized stacks, this was a 25 infantry stack, but that only means that I have to do 12 points of damage. It's fairly easy to do that with a limited amount. So you can make some pretty big gains as we're getting into this era of the war, and that's what the Germans are hoping for with knocking the French out. But they're getting their asses kicked right now by the Brits. It's a long way to Belgium, though. Well, the Brits decided to call a halt. They're pushing pretty hard. You could think, well, maybe they could go for this hex, and I would have gone for it, but that's a city. I can't force the retreat easily there. That's what I really, really want. If I'm going to commit tanks to an attack on a city like that, which is what I'd have to do, I want to make sure I have my best troops there. I may still do it without supply, although that's kind of ugly too. So I'm considering halting the attack until December, and then starting it up again with armor, with artillery, and with the supplies. Try to take Amiens, and then see if I can continue. Alternative options were to slam down and threaten this German front in the southern area where they shouldn't even be, where they should have pulled out. But that's not what the British want. The French are probably saying, yo, the Germans are coming in. they're building up. And the English are probably saying, "No, I've hammered them pretty hard here. I've stretched their line. I've done a lot of damage to it. I don't think trying to collapse this is all that valuable." I'm not sure. Anyway, the Germans certainly think they can't hold it, but they want to, and they're very pleased to have been given that respite as the Somme line has been advanced to. All right, well, that's the end of November. As usual, when I move into December, I, of course, set up the turn, but then I set up the next year. Oh, I haven't gotten to the Germans yet. Damn. And when I set up the next turn here, well, I ended up with a bunch of U.S. counters that aren't being used. And maybe that's true about most of the countries, that there's additional counters maybe for the link to east to west. I don't know what they're for. Maybe things that were used in the Italian front that maybe there's some option for that doesn't seem to exist or whatever. But they don't show up in my reinforcements chart, a significant number. There's also some weird things. Yeah, I know, I'm griping about the same kind of stuff. These replacement infantry divisions that aren't replacement counters. They look like normal infantry divisions. And the replacement's there in parentheses on each of them. I don't know what that's meant to be. I've not seen that before. It's not the black bordered, hey, you got to spend replacements for that. I haven't looked up what the American replacement points are, but they're not very high. They've only got one counter, so they can't be getting a lot of replacements. So it may just be that you're expected to kind of funnel these in and rebuild your units with them or something. I don't know. That could just be a historical note there that's not explained, which wouldn't shock me too much. Anyway, what we've seen here, the Brits stopped their assault. They want some supplies. They want to break Reims. I also noticed that I screwed up and forgot to build my Hindenburg line hexes when winter came. And so now I've filled those in here, and also some along the Somme line. They didn't have all of them. Reims is one of them. That gives them a big bonus. They're not going to be able to use the urban hex side bonus there, by my understanding of how that works. Well, wait, there's a city center, but there's no urban hex sides. So I don't know. If they are, I guess they can use both terrain, the trench and the hex side. I don't think there's a prohibition against that. So that would make it a really, really tough city to take. I seem to recall, though, that those are restricted. Here I am looking this crap up again. I'll probably have to look it up yet again later. The defender can opt to use urban terrain if the hex under attack contains any single urban terrain hex side and a city center. Well, there's no urban terrain hex side. So all they're going to have is the entrenchment there. Reims isn't that important except, well, it's got two really major things. It is the rail net. The Germans can't use that net anymore for the most part because it's on the front line, and they've got rail net back here. But this was a key rail net for the Allies throughout most of the war. They got pushed out of it during the Kaiserschlacht, I think, and then retook it. But it's also the defensive value of it. But if it falls, even though it's a city or whatever, it doesn't affect the German morale or the Allied morale. And that kind of troubles me a little bit. I feel like you should gain something for land gains and lose something for land losses. I don't know how much, and I don't know how much detail you want to have. But these things were a big deal. When the armies were advancing, they got a little spring in their step, as it were, in a lot of cases. And when they were retreating, that demoralized them in a sense probably as much as army losses were demoralizing to them. When they held, it was fine, but there was a heavy loss when they fell back. That's just not covered in this game. It just seems to look at it as, all right, demoralization is really manpower reserves being eaten up. to the extent that the army can no longer produce the supplies, etc. You've pumped too much in. And it's a different view. It's not really demoralization points so much as it's economic damage points. All right, up this one goes.